Hello, everybody. How are you all doing on this fine, I don't know, whatever the day of the week it is? Um, I think it's actually Friday. That's a good thing, I think. So, today we are going to be talking a little bit more about Lima's appearance on the No Jumper podcast. Yes, one and the same as the one where they talked about me for like over half of it. It's really cute that this guy was making podcasts about me before I even knew that he existed, but here we are, hashtag winning. I did drink a Red Bull today, so I feel like I shouldn't have done that. I am wired. Don't put me in a conservatorship, y'all. As y'all know, the interview of Lima on No Jumper with Adam 22, aka Adam Grand Mason, aired a couple days ago, and it's an hour and 42 minutes long. So it's gonna take me a while to address everything that I feel like I need to address from this video. But let's just, find a jumping in point right now. I already made one video about this situation yesterday. I actually went live. So if you missed that one, make sure you check it out. So today we're going to be talking about a pretty serious subject from the conversation that Lima and Adam had. Typical disclaimer, I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. So nothing in this video is legal advice or official legal opinion. This is just my personal opinion. And we're going to get into some pretty serious things. So I just want to be very clear up front that I know I like to make jokes and laugh and stuff on this channel, but I'm not joking about this matter. And I'm not making fun of Lima about this matter. In fact, what I really want to show is another huge example of why I fight against corrupt, abusive conservatorships and why I actually think conservatorships shouldn't really exist at all, particularly in the way that they exist today. And that is because the laws that determine whether or not you're unable to care for yourself, etc., are kind of wishy-washy, for lack of a better word. We'll get into some examples in this video, and I think it'll be a better illustration of my point than if I were to just, soapbox for the whole first 10 minutes. So let me pull up the screen and show you an example of something Lima said. Again, this is not to make fun of Lima. This is not to belittle her or demean her in any way. It is just to show you her own words about her own experience. Okay. So nobody in the comments make fun or make any jokes about this subject because it is a very serious subject and I'm not trying to make fun of it at all. So let's pull it up. Let's see. I'm going to just let Lima speak for herself and maybe I'll interject. Maybe I won't. Who knows?
I ended up in debt with the situation. And
so just for context, Lima is now describing an event in this clip right here that occurred on Thanksgiving 2020. So this would have been a year and a half or 2 years before I ever even knew the woman existed. Okay, so nothing she's about to describe applies to me. I just want to be very clear because she wasn't extremely clear about that in this interview. So I just want to be clear that whatever she's talking about here about drama on the internet had nothing to do with me because I did not know that she even existed at this point that she's describing this story. But she's talking about an incident that happened where she thought she was going to be able to raise $250,000 from Mark Leta's Soft White Underbelly audience, and she only raised $1,500. So, because she had already agreed to the court that she would financially cover Amanda's treatment, she was responsible to cover it. Now she's describing here in the story, and y'all, I encourage you to go watch the full podcast yourself if you can stomach it, because it has a lot of relevant information that I think you should hear directly from her. But in the story here, she's describing that there's this woman at the rehab center where Amanda Rabb was staying, who was under Lima's care at the time. And the woman at the rehab was saying, we are going to kick Amanda out unless you pay us. And it was like, I don't know, several $1,000s a month. So Lima, according to her, this is her current version of the story, took out a loan sort of seemingly unbeknownst to her husband. And she said he found out about the loan and they started fighting. And it was around Thanksgiving 2020, so like 2 years ago. And now she's in Chicago meeting his family for the first time. So she describes a situation where she actually had a lot of stress. And it's understandable why she felt like she was under this amount of stress. And let's hear it from her how she handled it.
but I knew that when people saw that I was actually helping Amanda, that they would that it would start raising money and I would be able to pay the loan back. And my husband found out that I took this loan on top of all the other drama I was going with debt in my company and all this other stuff. So we were arguing the entire time, and I had this massive loan, and I felt like the entire internet hated me. But I, you know, like I just knew that I was gonna be able to. I mean, I ruined Thanksgiving that year. Things were just so shocking to me that I just decided to give up, and I've never had a suicidal moment in my life, but I was like, I'm just gonna kill myself.
Really?
I've never said this, like, only a couple of my friends know, but so it was Thanksgiving 2020, and my husband and I were fighting about money. I felt like I lost my sisters. I didn't know how I was going to maintain Amanda in treatment. Everything was just falling apart. I was like, I can't make payroll. I don't know how to tell my team. And so I took a lift to a bridge in downtown Chicago, and I left without my jacket, and I told my husband. He was trying to give me my jacket, and we were arguing the whole time, and I was like, I don't need it where I'm going. And he called the police because he kind of understood what I meant, and obviously his whole family's there. Super embarrassing. And then I got to the bridge, and I realized
the Lyft driver's family was there?
No. My husband's whole family was there for Thanksgiving.
Right.
So we got married in 2019.
Uh-huh.
And this was like my Thanksgiving with his family as us being married. And this is like the introduction. And so I took a lift from the house because we were arguing, plus like all the other stress I had. I'm like,
to the
bridge in Chicago. And I'm like, I'm just going to kill myself. So I get to the bridge, and it's so low. And I'm like, if I jump off this thing, I'm going to survive. And then we're going to have helicopters. And then everyone's going to be like, mental health founder. I'll probably end up on the No Jumper Instagram account.
Yeah.
Mental health founder, CEO jumps off the bridge,
That's cool that you're so tapped in that you perceived the meme before it happened. Yeah.
I was like, no one will ever trust me to like do anything ever again. No investor will ever, back me.
Probably
so,
not. Time's gotta
no
be bad
way.
for
No, it would ruin everything. And so
confidence.
I ended up going back. I called my husband, and he came to get me, and I went back, and I remember staying in the room for 3 days. I didn't want to face his family because I was so embarrassed. It was awful. Like, anyways. So that was when I ruined Thanksgiving in 2020.
Whew, okay. So what you just heard was Lima describe a moment of tremendous stress in her life. And there was a lot of factors and a lot of variables. And as much as I have this feud and everything with her, I don't like to hear that people went through anything like that. And I'm glad she's obviously not going through that anymore. But and I want to be sensitive here because I'm not trying to make light of this. I'm not trying to make fun of this. What I want to do, and what I'm proceeding to do for the rest of this video, is to show you a difference in the consequences for people in Lima's orbit. Okay. So of course I don't live in a vacuum, but I can imagine how I would have reacted to hearing that story from Lima before I ever knew she existed, right? So like, I'm an unsuspecting subscriber on what's it called? No Jumper. And I watched this woman for the first time, and she tells this story. What my natural reaction to the story would be, it sounds like she was under a tremendous amount of stress and turmoil and chaos and uncertainty in her life. And maybe there were some things that were out of her hands, and it caused her to feel like, she described it, like she wanted to give up. Obviously, we're on YouTube, so I can't say what she meant, but I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. But I don't live in a vacuum, and I don't have amnesia, and I do know who Lima is. And I know other things that Lima has said around and about this same topic. And in fact, this story about the bridge incident, I think kind of proves a lot of the points that I've been trying to make to Lima and to society at large about crisis situations. It's not to take away the person's rights or freedoms. The way to handle a crisis situation is with, compassion and empathy and things like that. It's very interesting to me that Ivan, according to Lima, called the police on Lima, but the police are not the entity that took her home. She said that her husband took her home. So it could have turned out very different for Lima. What if Lima was put into some type of 5150, whatever Illinois' version of that is? You know what I mean? It's like, while she was doing this whole bridge incident, talking about, I don't need it where I'm going, having these thoughts and ideations, she was actively in charge of someone else's court-ordered treatment. It happened during the time Amanda was already in treatment. She was in charge of it. And so it just begs the question in my mind, why someone who's been through those types of thoughts and circumstances themselves, hasn't been locked away against their will, wasn't taken into the police station or to a hospital or anything like that. She was treated with compassion and kindness and picked up and brought back to safety. It's so difficult for me to imagine how a woman who has that experience personally could possibly continue to call the cops over and over on Bam Margera because he said he wanted to jump off a building, right? And he said he wasn't even actually going to do it. Lima said that she actually began the plan to do it. She left the house, she went to the bridge, she was there, she's standing, she's looking. I also want to discuss the last part of what they said, right? Lima said the reason she didn't do it is because she thought it wouldn't work. And then she would have all these social consequences. And I don't like that either. And here you have, what's his name, just chiming in like, oh, yeah, that's pretty serious.
I was like, no one will ever trust me to like do anything ever again. No investor will ever, back me.
Probably
so,
not. Time's gotta
no
be bad
way.
for
No, it would ruin everything. And so,
like, why? Why is that some shameful thing? Like, clearly, lots of people have experienced that emotion and maybe even gone to that extent. Clearly, it's not a healthy state of mind to be in. I'm not saying, yeah, let's all be there. But why? I think, honestly, if I'm going to support a mental health company, I would like the founder to have struggled a little bit somehow with mental health. But I think they're not wrong, right? I'm not disagreeing with what Lima and Adam Grand Mason are saying, because what they're saying is people would judge you. If that happens and you remain alive and all that, you're going to have a hard time in the future because people would judge you. And I don't think that's cool. I think we have got to move past the point where we keep holding people prisoner to their past choices and actions. I'm not even going to say past mistakes, because sometimes we have to make catastrophic decisions for ourselves in order to learn a lesson. And that's not a mistake. It was part of the learning process and part of the journey. We have to stop holding people accountable for things that we should just let them move on from. And so I just wanted to make that slight commentary. We have a little bit more to look at this video, though. Let's get to that.
There's a stark raving mad lunatic mob.
Right. I just wanted to remind y'all what this man thinks about me and women like me.
Mob on the internet that's out to basically terrorize innocent civilians for content.
Oh, is that what?
And I think that a lot of these women should be locked up because they're sick in the fucking head. A lot of these women should be locked up because they're sick in the fucking head. A lot of these women should be locked up because they're sick in the fucking head.
Okay. So I just want to point out the irony, the hypocrisy, or perhaps just the utter lack of competence and logic that exists in this little vacuum here. Because in the same interview where Lima's talking about the bridge incident and an ideation and a plan to go and effectuate the bridge plan, we have this man saying that because women like me are looking into lies and, mysterious circumstances surrounding a very public, high-profile passing, we should be locked up. But he didn't think that Lima should be locked up for saying that she left in the middle of a Thanksgiving and in the middle of Chicago, didn't have a coat on and wanted to jump off a bridge. Like that's not something that you should be locked up for, according to Adam. But I guess me looking into the causes and circumstances of a very high profile situation is somehow I need to be locked up. I need to lose my freedoms. I need to have no freedoms because Adam doesn't like what I'm talking about. Anyway, I already made a whole video about that yesterday. Let's keep going.
I really
You don't have to be on board for the entirety of what I just said, but from what I could tell, this thing that we're discussing is like InfoWars for chicks.
So what we're about to look at is Lima's appearance on Soft White Underbelly about 3 months before her description of the bridge incident. Okay. This clip was posted on August 30th, 2020, and Thanksgiving would have been about 3 months later, November 2020. So what you're about to see is from 3 months before the bridge incident. Let's hear what Lima has to say about people's attire being weather appropriate.
is the way that you get somebody that doesn't want to get help into treatment is through something called an LPS conservatorship. And that's what we're using for Amanda. It's a very difficult process. So they make it challenging because they want to make sure it's not abused. You have to prove 2 things, and it's easier if it's a family member. So Amanda's father is working really, really hard, night and day, to make this happen with me. The second factor that we have to prove, and we've been working on doing this, is she has to check off one of 3 things. But fortunately, Amanda.
So this is Lima, I know it's obvious, but just to gather our thoughts, this is Lima discussing how they were going to implement a plan to put Amanda into a LPS conservatorship in California. Now, just to clarify, just for context, Amanda never was put into the LPS conservatorship. They diverted and instead they did court-ordered treatment. But this video is from a time when Lima was trying to do the LPS conservatorship, and she's telling Mark's audience, you have to prove 2 things. One, you have to prove something, whatever. I don't know. I skipped through it because this girl just talks and talks. And now she's on to the second factor. So in order to prove the second factor, the proposed ward or the proposed conservatee, Amanda, would need to meet one of 3 criteria. So she's about to tell you what that is.
Checks off all 3. So it's shelter, food, and clothing. And so that's what gravely disabled means, is that the person cannot provide shelter, food, or clothing for themselves. So again, it only has to be one of these 3. And so essentially, by shelter, the person doesn't have a safe place to live. By food, the person has lost a significant amount of weight that could be a health risk. And by clothing, it could be that the person will not change their clothes for a long period of time. So bacteria buildup can also cause a health risk to that person, or that the person takes off their clothing at inappropriate times, which could be a health risk because of the weather, if it's very cold, if it's very hot, or that the person takes off their clothing at inappropriate times, which could be a health risk because of the weather, if it's very cold, if it's very hot.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen Amanda walking down the street, no shoes, no socks, no pants, just a tank top.
Yeah.
And
3 months later.
I took a lift to a bridge in downtown Chicago, and I left without my jacket, and I told my husband, he was trying to give me my jacket, and we were arguing the whole time, and I was like, I don't need it where I'm going.
nothing else. I'll buy her pants and shoes, and then she'll just walk away.
Yeah,
And just leave them on the sidewalk.
So basically checks off every box, right?
So what you just heard Lima describe was one way to prove that someone is gravely disabled is if they take off their clothes at inappropriate times for the weather. Okay. Now, full disclosure, y'all, my personal opinion is that's ridiculous. People should be able to wear or take off or do whatever they want to whenever they want to. But this is the purpose. This is the point of this video, because the conservatorship laws and the statutes are written so loosely that they really can just be twisted and perverted to mean anything and at any time, right? So I was accused in the interview by Lima of being very liberal and also Trump somehow. I don't know how those 2 things can exist in the same time, but I was accused of being very liberal. And Lima's reasoning for me being very liberal is I believe people should be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want.
And I guess that's what's like polarized people with me still, because they're very, like, the people that are against me are very liberal. Like, you should be allowed to do anything. You know, it's like, I'm sorry, but I don't want my sister doing anything to the point of where I'm at her funeral. Like, I want her to get help, even if she doesn't want the help.
These
and
people
eventually
are
she's going to be
insane.
grateful.
I mean, within some reason, but I really think that people should just be able to do whatever they want. I really do think that, like, don't infringe on other people. Clearly don't harm or steal from other people or anything like that. I don't think you should be able to do that. But the way that the laws are written, it is like, oh, you know, unable to provide for themselves, unable to provide shelter, unable to, accurately clothe themselves. It's clear that we don't all have the same definition of what is an inappropriate time to take off your clothes, right? Like, we don't all have the same definition of that, because I mean, I remember when I lived in Boston, I would go out to, like, clubs or whatever, and it would be like, the wind chill would be like -5 degrees, and there would be girls in their 20s out there with little dresses on and no coat. And it was like, according to Lima's criteria for an LPS conservatorship that she just gave, those girls would be gravely disabled because they are not wearing appropriate clothes for the weather. And an argument, and I'm not trying to be funny here. This is like what the type of stuff that you do as thought exercises in law school, right? If it's the case that Amanda taking off her clothes when Lima deems it's inappropriate, Amanda needs a conservatorship, then couldn't someone else, perhaps Ivan, right, or Ivan's family member, said, this lady, Lima, whenever she was having her crisis, is gravely disabled. And she's a danger to herself. She is a danger to her own health and her own self. Lima has said before, you know what? I'll try to see if I can get the clip. But she has actually said before that if somebody unalives themselves, then that is a crime, and that person being a harm to themselves is the same as them being a harm to someone else.
That's the point that a lot of people don't understand. So they think that when you take someone's freedom away to make decisions, when that person's making bad decisions, you don't really have a choice. Like, for example, if I try to kill you, Dave, then I'm probably going to go to jail if I succeed, or if it's an attempted murder, because I tried to hurt another person. But if I try to kill myself, I'll be held for 72 hours and released. But that is another person that I'm trying to kill.
Right.
So somebody that is trying to hurt another person, even if that person is themselves, should not be making those decisions and be running wild and free. And people will never really truly understand the significance unless they have a family member that's really struggling. So
someone else. Well, I'm not making the argument that Lima should be in a conservatorship. I don't really believe in conservatorships. I think the threshold for a conservatorship should be astronomical. And I just don't. I think because Lima's making decisions I wouldn't make doesn't mean she's qualifies for a conservatorship. But what I do want to really drill into in this particular video is that if the shoe were on the other foot and Lima had different people around her at the time where she had her crisis breakdown, she could have ended up in a very similar situation to Bam or to Amanda, because there she was, not wearing weather appropriate clothes. She was presenting a danger to her own self based on her own admission. And the only reason she didn't do it was because she was scared of memes and maybe it wouldn't work or something. I don't really know. And again, I'm not trying to make fun of this. I think Lima had very good reasons for being stressed. I could see why she was in crisis. And, I think we've probably all been there from time to time. But do you see how I'm having compassion on Lima? That's what we have to do to people. We have to have compassion. We have to say, you know what? Let me put myself in your shoes. Why were you feeling the feelings you were feeling? And I don't understand how Lima could have gone through a crisis situation like this, but still be thinking that taking away someone's autonomy and their ability to make medical choices for themselves as a healthcare guardian or a healthcare proxy is in any way going to make you feel better when you're in a crisis situation. I just can't see how that could be possible. Let's watch a couple more clips that I wanted y'all to see. So now we're going to move on to talk a little bit about Bam.
Well, they made me want to jump off.
So now we have Bam on the Steve-O Wild Ride podcast. This was recorded in May 2022, and it was published on Wild Ride podcast on August 11th, 2022.
The tallest building on the planet.
Okay, be careful with saying things like that because that triggers 5150s, and careful with saying things like that 5150s and saying I want to jump up.
I said that's why I got in my position, because I said if I don't see my kid, if he's not on that airplane, then I'm going to jump off a bridge or something.
Right.
And then I got Marchman acted in Florida.
A moment in my life, but I was like, I'm just going to kill myself. I took a lift.
Okay. So there you have Bam Margera on Steve-O's podcast doing exactly the same thing that Lima just did on Adam 22's podcast. And that was describing a moment of tremendous crisis and stress in his life, and then feeling or expressing verbally that he would like to jump off a bridge. Okay. He literally said a bridge, like it's exactly the same thing. But then Bam went further to say, I wasn't even actually the word SUICIDAL. He was like, I wasn't even actually that. He was just expressing the stress right through his words. And he was just making, sort of hyperbolic, idle threats. And Steve-O cut him off. He stopped him and he said, wait, whoa. Be careful saying things like that, because that triggers 5150s. What's a 5150? It's an involuntary psychiatric hold against your will, which both Bam and Steve-O have been subjected to. So here's Steve-O joking and laughing, saying, Bam, don't express your feelings that you had during a moment of tremendous crisis, because if you do, you're going to be psychiatrically incarcerated against your will. But here we have Bam's literal guardian or former guardian doing exactly that. And that's where I think this thing falls apart, right? It's a perfect example. The woman who thinks that Bam saying that he wants to jump off a bridge equals he should be locked up is also saying just 2 years ago, and only a few months before she came into Bam's life, she did the same thing. She had the same response to crisis. And indeed, she actually took steps to effectuate it. Now, what I'm going to do here is also put in a clip from the Broward County body camera footage. This is from June this year, 2022, where April Margera is telling the police officer in Broward County, I need you to take him because I'm scared he's a harm to himself or others. He's going to jump off the building.
I'm like terrified. He thinks I called you guys, and I know Lima did, but it's like, he's a danger to himself right now because he's really, really distraught. And I mean, like, he needs to go back to rehab. And it's like, I'm scared to death. If you leave him here, I don't even know what's going to happen. Like, I'm scared to death for him. I'm scared that I'm scared that he's on the top floor, and he keeps saying that he's going to jump off the building. It's a whole thing. When did he say that? Just about a half hour ago. I'm like scared to death I'm just scared. He's really aggressive right now. I have to go through Lima, and she was trying to get a court order because he's under a Marchman Act, and he's under court order.
That supposedly is expired.
Okay, no, it's new, and it's today. It is like today. She's been all day at the courthouse. You can't leave me with him because, like, I don't know what's going to happen. He's so angry right now that he thinks I called you guys. Like, I'm terrified. I'm his mother, and I'm terrified.
So right there you saw it. April Margera using the dog whistle, gonna jump off the bridge, gonna jump off the building, as a way for the police to take away Bam's rights. But it's just not fair, because you have Lima in Chicago just a few months earlier, whatever, a couple, years earlier, taking steps to do exactly that and actually going to the bridge. And the only reason she didn't do it is because she didn't know if it was going to work. That's according to her. This is why it's not fair, because the law can just be applied willy-nilly. That's not fair. It's not fair that people like Lima, or Lima specifically, got to go through her crisis moment, which I'm not trying to diminish it. I can totally see why and how Lima was stressed. I can totally see it. And I can totally see how that moment of crisis wasn't permanent. It didn't require such a long-term solution as putting her in a guardianship. It required empathy and love. Her husband come pick her up and, probably a little bit more financial stability. But Bam Margera gets no such compassion. Amanda Rabb got no such compassion. It's like, if it's good for the goose, it got to be good for the gander. And I just don't see how this is being applied in a fair, equitable way. I see that these statutes and these laws can be used in ways that are not consistent. And if we're just like haphazardly using laws to lock some people up against their will with no jury trial, no due process, it's just not fair that these laws get used as tools against people sometimes in ways that clearly don't help them. Like, let's drop the charade. Amanda wasn't helped. She wasn't. I know some of y'all say, oh, well, she died sober. She had cannabinoids in her system. She had been in Lima's care for over a year. I'm not saying Lima gave them to her. What I'm saying is it's in black and white that she had cannabinoids in her system when she died. So was she sober? Ask yourself that. Use common sense. If you're an expert, use your expertise and tell me below if I'm wrong. How could cannabinoids be in the girl's system a year and a half after she's been in rehab? Unless she took them in rehab. Maybe they stay in your system years. I don't really know. Amanda wasn't helped. Bam hasn't been helped. He's escaping and running away every time we see him. What they tried to do is not working for Bam. What's the help? The shit don't help. It's just a way to take control over somebody. That's all. And the way that conservatorship laws are set up right now, I just only see it as a possible tool to be used in an unfair way and to be applied inconsistently. Because you have situations like Lima, she gets to freak out and run to the bridge and cause a big fiasco, commotion, and do all that. And she has no consequence as far as getting hauled off by the police. But Bam's just sitting minding his own business and the police are showing up on him. That's not fair.
That's why I got in my position, because I said, if I don't see my kid, if he's not on that airplane, then I'm going to jump off a bridge or something.
Right.
And then I got Marchman acted in Florida.
I took a lift to a bridge in downtown Chicago.
Bridge.
To the bridge in Chicago. And I'm like, I'm just going to.
I have completely graduated from all the 10 rehabs that I've been to against my will. I can tell you this, I got caught in something called the Florida Shuffle. Then as soon as I got to Florida, I said, I haven't seen my son in 200 days. If I don't see him, I'm going to jump off a building. Well, they thought I was going to kill myself. If you've seen my movie Jump Off a Building, all I do is jump off of buildings into pricker bushes and pools. So they didn't listen to that. So then I had to do 90 days.
So now I want to talk about one more little example of this where Lima uses things against people whenever it suits her, but she either ignores it completely when it doesn't suit her, or she uses it in her favor when it suits her, right? It's like there's not a lot of consistency in her opinions about other people's behaviors. And I'm going to give you one more small example of how when it suits Lima, a certain behavior is totally fine. But when it does not suit Lima, the behavior can be used against people to essentially assassinate their character and give you a reason why they need to be locked up. So this clip is from August 1st, 2020. It's the same month as the, other clip. This is still about 3 or 4 months before her bridge incident. So let's listen to what she has to say about her sisters and their high-risk behavior.
So with my sister's case, they leave the 30-day treatment, then they just feel like I'm completely alone with my illness or my addiction, and the only thing that they know, because the thing that makes them feel better, is an instant, immediate satisfaction, whether it be high-risk behaviors, being promiscuous, high-risk behaviors, being promiscuous.
So promiscuous is another word like woke, like inappropriate, that can mean anything. It can mean anything. What is promiscuous? We can look it up in the dictionary, but it could mean something different to different people. It has a sort of connotation, but she says that their being promiscuous is a high risk behavior. Okay. So let's hear what Adam 22, the guy whose podcast she just went on, has to say about another podcast that he runs.
Just give you props. The Plug Talk podcast, great idea.
The only podcast of its kind where we interview girls and
then
have
f them,
with
right?
Yes.
So you and your
lacking on the
fiance
wedding, yeah.
/ baby mama, you guys just had a baby. Shout out to your lady. The podcast just launched. Was it episode 3 or 4?
3 just came out with Selena Powell.
So
we didn't f her. We had a guy.
You go and you interview the person and it happens.
After, yeah.
Is it like continuous off the interview? Like, is it like the interview's like, all right, yo, that great interview, and then you just...
I mean, I would kind of like for it to be that seamless.
Or is it like a cut, and then it's...
We do a little cut because we have to take the mics off, because we're like wearing different mics like for the interview part, and then we switch to like a boom mic for the sex part. So there is like a quick break there, but I would like to have it be totally seamless where the girl can
That'd be hard.
Plop on top of the right
the
there.
Seamless.
So again, I just want to reiterate, I strongly believe that Adam and his girlfriend should be able to do whatever they want in a consenting way. And I really hope that they're having fun and living their best life. I truly do. I really do. Is it something I'm going to ever do? Absolutely not. Is it something I'm ever going to pay my money to watch? Absolutely not. But if you're asking my honest opinion, what he just described is promiscuity. Okay. So look how easy it is for me to say, well, he's promiscuous. Look what he's doing. Any reasonable person would agree that that's promiscuity. So that according to Lima, is a high risk behavior. Well, you're on a slippery slope now. Do y'all see what I'm saying? That's my whole point. I like making fun of things that are funny. This is not something funny to me. It is something very serious, because the loose definition of things like unable to care for yourself. Well, I mean, Lima's definition of unable to care for yourself included not able to access safe housing. Not everybody lives in a safe area. Do they all count as gravely disabled? And this is what people do. It might seem like I'm nitpicking, but this is the type of thought exercise that you would do in law school. You would do this type of thought exercise. How can the way that this law is written be used in a way that we didn't intend it to be used, right? And it's people like Lima. Maybe it's just because she's ignorant. Maybe it's because she's a little more insidious. I really don't know. But her saying, oh yeah, a person not changing their clothes for long enough time, you know, that's qualifies them as one of the check boxes for a conservatorship. And then you have Bam Margera, her conservatee, later saying he actually did have to get held longer in treatment because he kept the same clothes on for a long time. It starts to look like a pattern. But Lima had the same damn pants on whenever she did the Mark podcast and whenever she did the No Jumper podcast. Did she wash those pants? Does she need a conservatorship? You see how stupid it is? This has been my point the whole time. And I'm very glad that Lima finally gave me some examples that I could use to show that, look, Lima, this could have happened to you. Thank God it didn't. But here we are doing the same exact thing while in charge of someone else's health care, in charge of paying for it, in charge of her, doing the same thing, if not worse, because you actually went and took steps to do it, that Bam was doing. And he got put in a Marchman order for it. It's just not a fair application of the law. It's just not. You were saying that your sisters were engaging in high risk behavior because they were being promiscuous. But then here you are on Adam Jumper 22's podcast, Grand Mason, and he's very promiscuous. It's like, is that not a high risk behavior? It's not consistent. And that's a big problem. That's my main issue with these conservatorships, is that they can be used in ways that they are not supposed to be used, and in ways that are unfair, in ways that unfairly, in my opinion, unconstitutionally violate people's rights. I don't like it. And I'm glad that we now have these examples to show everybody deserves compassion. Everybody deserves to be treated like a human, and everybody deserves empathy. Put yourself in that person's position. It should be pretty easy if you've walked all the way to a bridge without a coat on in the middle of Chicago winter to imagine what Bam might have been going through whenever he hadn't seen his child in a year or more. His baby child, his firstborn. He's been locked up and held against his will, hasn't been able to access music. He hasn't been able to access his phone, hasn't been able to go on the internet. I can see how that could drive someone to the point of feeling like they need to act out. I can also see how Lima's situation could drive her to that point. But I wouldn't put people in a conservatorship. Y'all see how these laws can just be used any way against people? You don't change your clothes, so you need a conservatorship? You can't afford a safe. That's another word. Don't have no definite safe. What do you mean safe? What do you mean safe? What do you mean? It's these words that are not clearly definable that get used against people. And it's a lesson that I think everybody really needs to learn. That's pretty much all I had for today. Yeah, I'm going to be making a lot more videos about this topic, and they won't all take such a serious tone, but I did want to be serious about this topic because it's me being true to who I am and true to my opinions. I don't think it's cool to penalize somebody for their thoughts. I don't think it's cool to penalize somebody for months or years over something that they did in one moment either. I mean, unless, I'm not talking about crimes. Crimes are different because that goes through a jury and that has all this stuff. We could talk about it, have issues with it too. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about these conservatorship criteria, like high risk behaviors and not being able to afford housing. Who can securely afford housing these days? Not even probably half of us. So it's just not a fair way to use these laws against people to take away their rights whenever the rights that you're taking away are so fundamental and so important that really a jury should be deciding on this, not just some weirdo's definition of the word safe or inappropriate. Right? That's all I really had for the day. I will talk to y'all very soon. Facts ain't defamation. Love you, mean it. Okay, bye.